Could it be that the Great Flood in the Bible was not just a myth? There is scientific evidence that modern researchers simply cannot ignore. For thousands of years, the story of Noah and his massive ark has echoed in humanity's memory. Many believe it is only a religious tale, a metaphor of punishment and mercy. But what if there really was a cataclysmic flood that once drowned the world? Imagine one day the entire earth swallowed by water. The tallest mountain you have ever seen reduced to nothing more than a tiny island rising out of an endless ocean. All of humanity erased in the fury of nature. And only one family survives, drifting on a gigantic wooden vessel, carrying the seeds of a new beginning. It sounds like a science fiction movie, yet this is what has been recorded not only in the Bible, from ancient Mesopotamia to Greece, India, and even far-off civilizations in the Americas. All of them tell of a destructive flood. If that is true, then the entire history of humankind may need to be rewritten. And today, we will explore together whether Noah's flood truly happened or if it will remain forever a legend. The biblical story. According to Genesis, humanity had fallen. Greed, violence, and disobedience spread everywhere. The world was so steeped in sin that God decided to cleanse it completely with a catastrophic flood. Yet, in that darkness, there was one man who was chosen. Noah. He was described as righteous, different from the rest of his generation. God spoke to him, "Build an ark, and bring your family, along with the creatures of the earth, into it." Only Noah and his massive ark would survive. The rain began. 40 days and 40 nights. The waters rose, sweeping away every living thing upon the land. Everything, from fertile fields to crowded cities, vanished beneath the raging waves. Did you know the ark is described as being nearly 490 feet long, about 80 feet wide, and around 50 feet high, which is 150 meters long, 25 meters wide, and 15 meters high. That size is close to a modern cargo ship. Imagine such a colossal structure made entirely of wood, built by one man and his family. And within that ark, pairs of every living creature were sheltered, from lions, elephants, and giraffes to the birds of the sky. The story tells us that when the great door of the ark was shut, the floodwaters swallowed the entire world outside. But inside, Noah and his family became the last seeds of humankind. After many months adrift, the ark came to rest upon Mount Ararat. A raven was sent out, and then a dove, which returned carrying a fresh olive branch, a sign that the waters had receded. This is not just a tale of survival. It is a reminder that humanity once stood at the edge of extinction, with only one chance to begin again. Global legends. What is strange is that it was not only the Bible, but many other civilizations that also told of a massive flood. No telephones, no internet, no roads to connect them to one another. And yet, from the distant east to the vast west, people preserved the same memory. The Mesopotamians, in the ancient epic of Gilgamesh, told of a god who warned a man to build a boat in order to survive a devastating flood. Its echo is strikingly similar to the story of Noah. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha, two people who survived a global deluge when Zeus decided to destroy humankind. After the flood, they cast stones behind their backs, and from those stones new people were born. In India, there was the story of Manu. He was warned by a sacred fish about a flood that would drown everything. Manu built a boat and tied it to the horn of the fish, which pulled him to safety. In ancient Chinese legend, there was the tale of Yu the Great, who fought against catastrophic flooding. In the distant Americas, the Maya and the Inca also told of a great flood that destroyed the old world. Among the indigenous peoples of Australia, memories were passed down through generations of a sea that swallowed their land. Why would civilizations separated by half the planet share the same memory of a destructive flood? Could it be that this was not just a coincidence, but a fragment of a real event? Imagine the ancient people. They could not write. They had no maps, but they saw the waves swallowing everything before their eyes, and that memory was carved into their minds, passed on from generation to generation through stories, songs, and legends. Perhaps each civilization retold the story in its own way, adding layers of myth, adding details of the fantastic. But the core of a story remains the same: a flood, a vessel or a means of salvation, and a family or a group of survivors. If all of this were merely coincidence, that coincidence would be far too hard to believe. And if they were fragments of scattered memory, then, when we piece them together, we see a frightening picture. Perhaps humanity truly did once face a global flood. The scientific perspective. Modern scientists have uncovered some shocking hypotheses. This is not only about religion, not only about legend, but about clues hidden in the earth, in the rock, and in the memory of nature itself. Some researchers believe that after the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, enormous glaciers melted. That massive volume of water poured into the oceans. Sea levels rose, swallowing vast stretches of land. Places that were once fertile plains became the floor of the deep sea. Small coastal communities were forced to watch as their entire world disappeared in just a few generations. Imagine living in a small coastal village. Yesterday, you planted seeds in the fields. Today, that field has become a wide, endless pool of water. And only a few years later, the whole village is gone without a trace. To the ancient people, that was nothing less than a great flood that devoured everything. There is another hypothesis, just as famous. It's called the Black Sea Deluge. According to this theory, about 7,000 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea rose high enough to break through a narrow land bridge, flooding into a giant freshwater lake, which is today's Black Sea. The massive rush of water created a sudden catastrophe. An entire civilization along the shores of the lake was submerged. For them, that must have felt like the end of the world. And from that memory, the story of Noah may have been born. But it does not end there. Many geologists have found evidence of yet another global disaster. In layers of sediment, they discovered a thin, dark band, showing that water once swept across and deposited material on a massive scale. On tall mountain ranges, fossils of clams, snails, and other sea creatures have been discovered. How could they appear at altitudes of thousands of meters, several thousand feet above sea level, lest there had been violent upheavals of water? Some scholars even suggest that a meteorite or a massive volcanic eruption could have triggered global tsunamis. In the blink of an eye, entire regions of land sank beneath the sea. For the ancient people, that memory alone was enough to become a legend passed down through generations. Of course, none of these hypotheses are universally accepted. Science always demands concrete evidence, and ancient history often leaves only faint traces. But one thing is clear: too many clues point in the same direction. A massive flood or a series of overwhelming water-related catastrophes once swept across this planet. And when we place this next to the Bible and dozens of other legends, a great question emerges. Could Noah's flood have been not just a story to teach morality, but also humanity's historical memory? If that is the case, then science and religion are not two opposing paths. They are two pieces of a puzzle complementing one another to paint the picture of our past. The shocking truth: within layers of the earth, scientists have uncovered strange traces. Not tiny shifts over millions of years, but thick layers of mud, sand, and stone measuring several meters deep, which is many feet thick. These layers are stacked across entire continents, and all of them tell the same story. There was a time when water came crashing down and swept everything away in its path. On towering mountain ranges, places that take people days to climb to the summit, fossils of sea creatures have been discovered. Shells, coral fossils, remains that should only be found at the bottom of the ocean. This is something science cannot ignore. How could those marine creatures end up resting on the tops of mountains? This is no longer just about religion, no longer just about legend. Science has begun to touch things once thought to exist only in the Bible. Pause for a moment and imagine. You are standing on the summit of the Himalayas or the majestic Andes. The air is thin. Clouds swirl around the mountainside, and yet beneath your feet lie the remains of sea creatures that died millions of years ago. That is not just a paradox. It is a mystery that forces us to ask questions. Could it be that there was once a global disaster powerful enough to drown even the mountains? Or perhaps the earth itself went through violent upheavals so great that oceans and continents exchanged places. When the evidence is right before our eyes, it cannot simply be ignored. What science has uncovered does not diminish the story of Noah. On the contrary, it compels us to think. Perhaps beneath the shell of myth lies something real, a collective memory of all humanity. Could it be that Noah's flood was not only a religious legend, but a fragment of history? Perhaps that memory was carried through the Bible, through the Epic of Gilgamesh, through the stories of Deucalion and Manu, and countless other traditions. We have traveled from the biblical account through global legends and into scientific hypotheses, each step peeling back another layer of truth. And now, in this part, we go deeper still, to see that science and faith are not always opposed. They complement each other, and together they illuminate a truth greater than anything we have ever imagined. Geological evidence. When geologists dug deep into the earth, they uncovered strange layers of sediment. But across the entire world, from Asia to Europe to the Americas and even distant Africa, these sediment layers measure several meters thick, sometimes even tens of meters, which is many feet to dozens of feet deep. They were not formed slowly over millions of years, like so many other layers of rock. They bear the marks of a sudden event, a violent catastrophe. Water rushing through, carrying mud, sand, and stone, burying everything in its path. Inside those muddy layers, fossils have been discovered, but not intact fossils preserved over long ages. Instead, broken bones piled up in chaos, animals swept away together with trees, bones mixed with shells, coral, and seaweed, all pressed into rock as if by a giant hand in an instant. Picture it, a herd of animals moving across the grasslands, a lush green forest full of life. Then, in the blink of an eye, water comes crashing down, sweeping everything away, burying it all under mud and soil. And thousands of years later, all that remains is a dense stone layer locked in the earth. But it does not end there. The Alps, places so high they seem to have nothing to do with the sea, hide an almost unbelievable mystery. There, scientists have found fossils of marine creatures, shells, coral, even the bones of whales. Yes, whales. Massive creatures that live in the open ocean. How could they be found on mountain peaks? If there was not a colossal surge of water, how else could those sea creatures be resting thousands of meters high, several thousand feet above sea level? Some scientists argue the answer lies in geology. Mountains form when continents collide, forcing the seafloor upward. That is true, but the questions remain. Why do so many fossils appear as though they were buried suddenly, rather than formed gradually? Why do entire layers of rock across vast regions carry the marks of raging waters striking at the same moment? Geologists point out that some of these sediment layers stretch for thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles, with the same structure and the same age, as though a flood had swept across the entire globe. Not just a local flood. This was something far larger, far more violent. Look closely, and the earth itself tells a story. A story of life flourishing, only to be destroyed in an instant. A story of water sweeping away everything, leaving behind a fossilized memory in the ground. For us today, this is simply scientific evidence. But for the ancient people who saw it with their own eyes, it was the end of the world. A terrifying memory, powerful enough to become legend, passed down through the ages. And the questions still echo. If there was no great flood, then why are whales lying on mountain peaks? If there was no global catastrophe, then why do rock layers across the world tell the same story? Perhaps Noah's flood was not just a moral tale in the Bible. Perhaps it was a real memory. A memory carved by nature into the earth itself, so that thousands of years later we can still read it. Archaeological evidence and legends. If geological evidence shows us that the earth once endured violent upheavals, then archaeology and legend provide another layer of proof. Not just stone, not just fossilized bones, but memories recorded in writing, in drawings, in stories passed down through generations. Let us begin where humanity's cradle of civilization once stood: Mesopotamia. Here, archaeologists unearth clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform. On them was the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest literary works known to humankind. And within that story lies a passage that startles many. The god Ea warns Utnapishtim of a devastating flood. He is told to build a massive boat, to bring his family and the creatures of the earth. When the waters came, that boat preserved their lives. After the flood, Utnapishtim released a bird, and it returned with a green branch, a sign that the waters had receded. Sound familiar? It is almost identical to the story of Noah in the Bible. But what is striking is that the Epic of Gilgamesh predates the Bible by thousands of years. Does this mean that the memory of a global flood had existed in human consciousness long before it was written into Genesis, and not only in Mesopotamia? The Egyptians passed down myths of a massive flood. The Babylonians, in many ancient texts, described the wrath of the gods through water. The Greeks had the tale of Deucalion. The Indians spoke of Manu. The Chinese told of Yu, the Great, the hero who fought against raging floods. The Inca and the Maya in the Americas shared stories that were nearly the same. Pause and reflect. From the Middle East to Europe, from Asia all the way to South America, civilizations that never had contact with one another. Yet all of them tell of a flood that destroyed humanity. Was this only coincidence? Or was it the collective memory of an event that truly happened? Modern science adds its own thought-provoking evidence. In the Black Sea region, archaeologists discovered the remains of ancient villages. They now lie deep beneath the water. Walls of homes, wooden posts, pottery vessels, all submerged. It seems that what was once fertile, thriving land was suddenly swallowed by the sea. And not just the Black Sea. In the Middle East, archaeologists have found similar traces. In Iraq, Syria, and Turkey, thick layers of mud cut off the continuous development of civilization. As though a watery disaster had erased the people of that land in an instant. Imagine it. A bustling village suddenly swallowed by raging waves. The screams of the people drowned out by the roar of water. Centuries later, all that remains is a thick layer of mud beneath a lake bed. Thousands of years later, humanity digs it up, astonished at what is found. When the pieces of archaeology connect with legend, the picture becomes clearer. The ancient people did not record with numbers or charts. They told stories. They passed them down as myths. And when the same story appears everywhere among civilizations that never communicated, we are forced to ask, is this evidence or just a strange coincidence? Was Noah's flood only a religious lesson, or was it the memory of a catastrophe that all of humanity once endured? Modern science and the hypotheses. As modern science advanced, humanity gained more powerful tools. Not only chiseling into mountains or digging into the earth, not only reading ancient clay tablets, but sophisticated measurements from ice cores drilled in the Arctic and Antarctic to satellite data scanning the entire surface of the Earth. And that data has begun to reveal an astonishing picture. Post-ice age melting, sea level rise of 330 feet. About 12,000 years ago, the Ice Age ended. Gigantic glaciers covering North America, Europe, and Asia began to melt. That enormous volume of water rushed into the oceans. Scientists calculate that global sea levels rose by more than 330 feet, which is about 100 meters in just a few thousand years. Imagine living along the coast at that time. Today, you farm your fields. One generation later, that field has vanished beneath the waves. 2 generations later, your village has become the ocean floor. For the ancient people, it was nothing less than an endless great flood. And what is most striking is that this process happened everywhere, not just in one region, but across the globe. Humanity, small and fragile, was forced to witness the terrifying transformation of the planet. Tsunamis from meteorites and global volcanoes. But melting ice was not the only hypothesis. Some scientists point to evidence of meteorites crashing into Earth. Those impacts could have triggered colossal tsunamis, towering hundreds of meters, high hundreds of feet. In an instant, entire coastal regions would have been wiped out. There are also volcanic theories. A super-volcanic eruption, like Yellowstone in the United States or Toba in ancient history, could have unleashed unimaginable energy. Ash, toxic gases, and the shifting of tectonic plates would have been enough to trigger global tsunamis. As the seas surged, the young civilizations of that age could only preserve their horror by turning it into myth. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. One of the most famous ideas is the Black Sea Deluge. Researchers William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed it in the late 20th century. According to them, about 7,000 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea rose high enough to break through the Bosphorus land bridge. Salt water rushed into a massive freshwater lake, which is now the Black Sea. The overwhelming flood submerged the surrounding lands. Thousands of square kilometers, thousands of square miles farmland vanished. Entire villages around the lake disappeared within days. For the people living there, it was the end of the world. Fathers losing children, mothers losing their homes, communities wiped out by waves. And that memory carved itself so deeply into the human mind that it was passed down as the story of Noah. Surveys of the Black Sea floor have found traces of man-made structures, wooden posts, and pottery, all buried beneath layers of mud. It seems this hypothesis may not be mere speculation. It carries the weight of evidence. Greenland and Antarctic ice cores, climate change records. Another source of evidence comes from ice cores. Scientists drilled miles deep into ancient ice in Greenland and Antarctica. In each thin layer of ice are records of the atmosphere, volcanic ash, and carbon dioxide dating back tens of thousands of years. And the data tells a frightening story. There were times when climate shifted suddenly. Temperatures spiked within mere decades. ice melted with unusual speed. These changes align closely with the periods described in ancient flood legends. Today, scientists use supercomputers to simulate the past. The results show that a single extreme climate event could have been enough to create a great flood in the eyes of the ancient people. Science and the biblical memory. All of these hypotheses, melting ice, tsunamis, volcanoes, the Black Sea, share one common thread. They show that the Earth has endured massive water-related catastrophes, disasters powerful enough to destroy early civilizations, powerful enough to etch the memory of a great flood into human history. And when we compare them with the Bible, we find a strange overlap. Perhaps Noah's flood did not happen exactly as described, but science is beginning to confirm that the memory itself was not baseless. Science may, in fact, be confirming the memory of the Bible, and if that is true, then every flood legend from Gilgamesh to Deucalion to Manu to you, the Great, and to Noah, all fragments of a much larger truth, a truth that science and faith together are bringing to light. The message for humanity. Noah's flood is not only a story about the past, it is also a mirror reflecting the present. Look around the world today. Ice in Greenland and Antarctica is melting faster than ever before. Massive icebergs, weighing as much as entire cities, break away from the ice shelves and drift into the ocean. Sea levels rise year after year. Small islands in the Pacific are gradually disappearing beneath the waves. Coastal cities, from New York and Miami to Jakarta and Bangkok, face the growing threat of constant flooding. We too are standing before new, great floods, not by the hand of God, but by our own hands. Rising seas, melting ice, disasters growing stronger, storms more violent, drought and floods striking the same land, one after the other. And the question echoes, are we any different from the generation of Noah? Are we falling once again as we cut down forests, burn coal, drain water supplies, and disrupt the climate of our planet? The story of Noah reminds us that humanity is more fragile than we think. A rain that lasted 40 days was enough to erase civilization. Today, just a few decades of climate change have already shaken the lives of billions. We believe we control nature. We build skyscrapers, giant hydroelectric dams, vast megacities. But nature needs only one deep breath to sweep it all away. Remember the recent disasters. The Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 killed more than 200,000 people in only a few hours. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 drowned New Orleans. The tsunami in Japan in 2011 not only took tens of thousands of lives, but also released radiation from a nuclear power plant. These are not just numbers. They are warnings of how small we really are. If Noah's flood is the memory of a catastrophe, then that memory is not for amusement. It is a reminder that nature can rise in fury at any moment. And when that happens, humanity has only two choices: adapt or be swept away. Look at climate change today. Sea levels could rise more than 3 feet, which is about 1 meter by the end of this century. It may sound small, but just 1 meter is enough to drive hundreds of millions of people from their homes. Fertile plains like the Nile Delta, the Ganges Delta, and the Mekong Delta could be swallowed by salt water, losing their ability to grow crops. Economies, societies, and cultures all would be shaken. Perhaps we are rewriting the story of Noah in our own way, not with a giant wooden ark, but with technology, with science, with global efforts to protect our planet. But will we act in time? Will we unite, like Noah's family, to survive together? The message here is not only fear, it is a call. We can choose to live differently. We can protect the planet. We can prevent a new great flood if we are willing to look back at the past and learn from it. Noah's flood reminds us that in every age, humanity must remain humble before nature. Because with just one upheaval, one storm, one flood, one tsunami, everything we take pride in building can vanish in an instant. And perhaps it is that very fragility that drives humanity to search for meaning, to cherish life, to listen to both faith and science, so that together we can endure and move forward. If Noah's flood was real, what do we learn? If it was truly a historical event, then it proves that humanity once stood on the brink of extinction, that the world can vanish in a single outburst of nature's fury, and that survival is never guaranteed. If Noah's flood was only a legend, then why did all of humanity remember it? Why did civilizations from Mesopotamia to Greece, from India to China, from the Americas to Oceania, all tell the same story? Why was that memory carved so deeply that no civilization ever forgot? Perhaps humankind once witnessed something so vast, so terrifying, that it could never fade away. That question is not easy to answer. But the very fact that the question exists is enough to make us reflect. Because Noah's flood, whether it was history or myth, still carries a timeless message. That humanity is more fragile than we imagine. That every achievement, every structure, every source of pride can be erased in an instant. And that, to endure, humankind must remain humble. This is also where faith and science meet. Many believe they are opposites. But the truth may be different. Faith gives us meaning. It gives us strength to persevere, to hope, to rise again after disaster. Science gives us evidence. It gives us data to understand the world, to forecast disasters, to find solutions. And when both walk side by side, humanity can both understand and believe, both reason and feel. Imagine if Noah's flood was a collective memory, preserved in the Bible and in hundreds of legends. Then today, science is the way we decode that memory. Science is the new language to retell the ancient story. And faith is what keeps that story alive, giving it soul, giving it power, giving it meaning across time. Perhaps this is what Noah's flood was truly meant to say. Not only to warn of a flood, but to remind us that humanity survives only when it listens. Listens to nature, listens to science, and listens to the faith within ourselves. So whether you believe Noah's flood was a historical event or only a legend, the final question remains: what will we take from it? How will we let the past remind us? And which path will we choose so that we do not write a new great flood for humankind? Sometimes faith and science do not cancel each other out. They complete one another to illuminate a truth greater than anything we have ever imagined. From the Bible to global legends and even scientific evidence, all of it suggests that a catastrophic flood may truly have happened. Noah's flood is not just an ancient story. It is a reminder that humankind is fragile before nature. That even if we build towering cities that touch the sky, or send satellites into outer space, just one storm, one wave, one flood is enough to bring it all crashing down in a moment. But Noah's flood also reminds us of something else: that humanity has never stopped searching for truth. We want to know what is history, what is legend. And between faith and science, what is the missing piece that helps us understand ourselves? So this journey does not end here. There are still many earth-shaking stories hidden in the pages of the Bible. There are still countless mysteries that modern science is only beginning to uncover. If you want to keep exploring, if you want to go deeper with me into shocking truths that few people know, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, because what you have just heard is only the beginning. There are many more stories you have surely never heard before.